When I was growing up, we lived on a dead-end street. And at the end of the street were literally miles of woods and fields and, well, one big swamp. And that swamp was great when we were little, like particularly during winter. We'd freeze over, we'd skate down there, play hockey. Well, I didn't play hockey, but my brothers did. But during the summer, we had a golden retriever named Max. And Max particularly liked going into the swamp. And now think of a golden retriever. They have that nice long hair that would get full of gunk and mire all over. And of course, he would end up getting covered in ticks. And so my mom, of course, did not want him coming into the house, especially where he was that dirty and disgusting. So what we'd have to do is hose him off outside. Now that would take a while because that mire and that gunk and that swamp water got right to his skin. And so we'd have to really clean him and then find all of the ticks that had gathered on his body. Max had to be cleansed. He had to be cleaned. Even though he obviously didn't see anything wrong with what he had done. He thought he was perfectly fine. Mom thought differently. And of course, as usual, Mom won out. The reality is, we can kind of fall into the same role, in the same situation in our lives as Max. We get caught up in things that look really fun, that we really enjoy doing, that seem to really maybe cool us down a little bit. But what they really do is end up sort of making us not clean. And what we need to ask ourselves is a simple question. Do we think we need to be made clean? Is this something that we recognize within ourselves? Do we truly recognize that we are unclean? And this is an important question as we think about the lepers at the time of Jesus who had to warn people away. Or even in another story, the publican who recognized that he was a sinner. And he could not even look up to heaven, but humbly asked God to heal him. Or the good thief on the cross, when he recognized, as he said to the other thief, we deserve where we are at. He does not. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And all of these people, the leper, the publican, the good thief, all of them were able to be healed for the one recognition that they needed it. But I think sometimes we fall into the trap that it's not simply that we don't recognize we need to be cleaned. It's simply we don't want to be made clean. We think our lives are fine. We see nothing wrong with what we're doing. And how often have we heard people say this? About the scriptures. Well, God didn't really mean that. Jesus didn't really mean that. Or, if that's what God means, that's not a God I want in my life. Because clearly, God has to be wrong, not them. Maybe we've said these things ourselves at some point. And that's really where we get stuck in the muck and the mire. And it stays on us. But the truth and the reality is, we are all sinners. We all need to be made clean. So the reason I try to go to confession every 1 or 2 weeks, because it helps me to stay focused. And I come to recognize that what sets us apart from God is not God. It's ourselves. But the truth is, Jesus wants to make us clean, as he did the leper that day, as he did the publican, as he did the good thief. He wants to heal us. But we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to humble ourselves? Are we willing to humble ourselves to be cleaned and to be healed by Christ? Because ultimately, there's only one place that can truly happen: the sacrament of confession. So often people will say, well, I can just tell God I'm sorry. Well, you can, but that's not how God wants it done. And we don't get to decide how God wants it done. God gave us the gift of penance, confession, reconciliation, whatever you want to call it. He gave it to us for a purpose, because God knows we need it. It's not just, well, if you decide you want to do it. No, he gave it to us because he recognized that we need the sacrament. None of them are extra to our lives. Each and every one of them are intended to impact the life we are living. And ultimately, in confession, we are there not to belittle ourselves, not to feel bad about ourselves, but rather it is a place where we come to encounter Christ. And in that encounter, we come to recognize the depth of love that God has for us, and how he desires to share with us his compassion and his mercy. And it is there where Christ wants to make us clean and to heal us. May we be open to what God is calling us to. May we be willing to have that humble and contrite heart where we recognize that we are unclean. But God doesn't care. He simply wants to heal us, to set us free. And ultimately, when we are willing to humble ourselves, to have that humble and contrite heart, when we are willing to make use of this great gift that our God has given us in the sacrament of confession, it is there that opens our heart more fully. It is what will lead us to be like Paul. It is there that this will lead us to do everything for the glory of God.